Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch are among the drivers who were announced that will race in the SRX in 2023. Alex Bowman is encouraged he will return to Hendrick Motorsports in 2024. And Landon Cassill confirms this morning that he will not be returning to college racing on a full-time basis in 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Love's Travel Stop in Speedco, as it was announced yesterday that they will continue sponsoring Michael Liddell and Zane Smith in 2023. Really great to see Love's Travel Stop and Speedco continue working both those drivers. Love's Travel Stop has been part of Firm Motorsports now for over a decade, and it's great to see that they will continue sponsor both drivers in 2023. Maybe one of those sponsors will be Zane Smith, sponsor of the Daytona 500. Who knows? But great to see both companies working with their drivers, respectively, in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Charge Me. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Charge Me will continue sponsoring Chandler Smith at College Racing in 2023. The first race you'll see Charge Me on the car for Chandler Smith will be at Auto Club Speedway. Charge Me is a sponsor of Chandler Smith, I think, for the last 2 seasons. They also sponsored him in select Xfinity Series races when he drove for Sam Hunt Racing in 2022. Great to see that Charge Me will continue to sponsor Chandler Smith, and the car looks pretty great, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Monster Energy. As there was a video that came out from 2311 Racing at the test that took place at COTA, and it looks like Monster Energy is going to be joining and sponsoring Tyler Reddick in 2023. Currently, Monster Energy sponsors Ty Gibbs, Haley Deegan, and also Riley Herbst as well, and Kurt Busch if he is to race this year in 2023. Great to see that they're extending their branding to work with Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick is a pretty marketable driver, and I'm glad that we're going to see Monster Energy colors with Tyler Reddick's car. It looks pretty exciting that they'll have him on there. I think that's exciting, and I think that's really great to see that that's going to happen, because I think it's really great, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about safety. As it was announced yesterday, there's some new safety updates coming for 2023. So NASCAR, of course, is making some pretty big safety updates, and they are now going to be requiring different headstock and head skirts, and also underwear and socks are going to be required as well, fireproof requirements, which, again, I don't know why drivers would not have been wearing that kind of stuff. They want everyone to be really safe, especially with, like, fires. I think a lot of this is due to Noah Gragson not really wearing an undershirt, and basically Jordan Anderson's crash at Talladega, I think, is one of the reasons why this is being required, which you want NASCAR to be safe. So I'm glad that they are basically taking precautions and trying to help with everything. So really good stuff for sure. There's been some safety changes. I'm glad to see that they're trying to be a little bit more safe. I think that's overall great for the sport, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about podiums at the LA Clash. As it was announced yesterday that there is going to be a podium at the Los Angeles Clash. Very similar how Formula 1 does it, and very similar how they do it at the Olympics, because, of course, the LA Coliseum will be the hosting of the Olympics, as the United States will host the Olympics in 2028 with Los Angeles. There is going to be a podium with medals for the top 3 finishers at the Busch Light Clash. Honestly, if it's just for the Busch Light Clash, I'm absolutely okay with it. Let's just not make this a normal thing, but I guess this will maybe just be a thing for the Busch Light Clash. I think it's an interesting choice, to be honest, if they're going to do this just for the podium. I think it's very interesting for sure. And in all honesty, in all seriousness, I do like that they're doing this. I think it's fun, and I think it's very interesting if they're just doing this for the podium. I think it's a good decision just for the podium, and I actually do like that they're just doing that for the podium. I think it's good, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Formula 1. Now, there have been some talk and conversations about Formula 1 potentially making some changes to the 2023 Formula 1 schedule. Well, it was officially confirmed on Monday that yesterday actually, that the 2023 schedule will still continue to be 23 races, and there's no races that are being scheduled to be added or basically taken away for 2023. So it will still remain a 23-race schedule. There have been talk they were trying to replace the Chinese Grand Prix, which unfortunately got canceled due to certain reasons I cannot talk about. But unfortunately, that race has been canceled, so there will only be 23 races on the F1 schedule. Again, I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised that they're not going to be adding more races to the F1 schedule. Again, I think 23 races is pretty fair. You don't want to get the schedule really, really long. I wish there was a way that can basically kind of shorten the gap a little bit between the months, but you can't really, especially with F1. You really can't shorten those gaps. So it's very disappointing that they can't do that, but it is what it is. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. As it was announced yesterday that Denny Hamlin has a new show that's going to be on Dirty Mo Media, which is called Actions Detrimental with Denny Hamlin. It's really great to see that Denny Hamlin's going to get a new show. Denny Hamlin has become a really outspoken personality inside the garage. And for him now to have his own show where he's going to be able to be a lot more outspoken than he wants to be, I think is really, really incredible for the sport in general. And I'm very excited to see that this show is going to be coming around. Denny's going to be able to talk about his races every single week, and also will be able to kind of call out drivers on his show if they want to. Maybe bring on some guests as well to talk with those drivers on the show, which I think, like I said, is extremely exciting. It's really great to see that Dirty Mo Media continues to expand their show and all their horizons as well. I think it's really great, and happy to see that we're going to see a new show on Dirty Mo Media. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Daytona 500. As it was announced yesterday, the Daytona 500 has sold out once again for 2023. This is for the grandstand seats and camping. This is the 8th year in a row, which goes all the way back, I believe, to 2016, the Daytona 500 has sold out. Keep in mind the Daytona 500 is still a little bit over a month away, and they've already sold out, which I think is absolutely incredible and absolutely amazing for the Daytona 500. It's great to see the Daytona 500 continues to sell out. It's huge for the sport. It's great to see, and I'm happy that people are going to be going to the Daytona 500 this year. I feel like this Daytona 500 has a lot more hype than other Daytona 500s in the past, which, again, I think is really exciting and really awesome to see. So, very happy to see for sure the Daytona 500 has sold out. Really amazing to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Hill Motorsports. As it was announced yesterday, the Hill Motorsports is only going to be running one truck in 2023, which will be the number 56 truck. This truck will be split between both of the brothers, Timmy Hill and Tyler Hill. Last year in 2022, we saw the 5 truck and the 56 truck both on the track throughout the season. The 56 was full-time, and the 5 truck was part-time. Now they're only going to be focused on running one truck. I think that's a smarter decision, honestly. I know it's a little disappointing that we're not going to see more trucks on the grid, though I do think you're going to see still a ton of trucks on the grid. But it's disappointing that they're downsizing, but I think it all comes down to sponsorship and funding. I don't think that 5 truck was going to be bringing in sponsorship and funding. So it is what it is. I'm glad to see both will still get to race. Basically, probably split the schedule. I still think Timmy will run a majority of the races this season. But it is a little disappointing. But at the same time, I am not surprised or shocked that they are downsizing to one truck, considering that they want to kind of save a little bit of money. So not shocked or surprised, but it is still a little bit disappointing at the same time. Just a little bit, definitely a little bit disappointing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Kyle Busch. As Kyle Busch was speaking to the media, and he is very excited about 2023 and getting the season rolling. Kyle Busch obviously will be joining Rich Schultz Racing in 2023. He's got a pretty long contract with that team and be looking to win, in his first year, he'll be looking to win his 3rd NASCAR Cup Series championship, which is interesting because he won the 2015 championship in 2019. Maybe this year Kyle Busch wins a 3rd championship. Who knows at this point, but Kyle Busch is extremely excited, and I think he's going to be a threat this year, and I really think that he will be a legitimate championship contender at Richard Childress Racing. And you look how fast their program was at road courses with Richard Childress Racing, especially with Tyler Reddick. I think he's going to be able to help Austin Dillon improve a lot on different types of racetracks throughout the year. And I think Kyle Busch is absolutely going to be a threat this year at a ton of races. And if you're a Kyle Busch fan, you should absolutely be excited and stoked that he's joining this team, because I think he's going to have a lot of confidence. I think he's going to have a lot to prove. And I think he's going to prove a lot of stuff going into this year. So I'm excited to see what Kyle Busch can do this year. And I'm glad that he will be joining Richard Childress Racing this season. I think he's going to be a threat. And I think he will be fun to watch throughout the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Takuma Sato. is it was announced yesterday that Takuma Sato will be joining Chip Ganassi Racing in 2023 on a part-time basis. He'll be driving a number 11 car, which is the 4th entry for Chip Ganassi Racing, but he will only be running the oval races. That includes both Iowa races, the Indianapolis 500, and also a Gateway as well. And maybe Texas, but I don't think Texas is on the schedule this year. Takuma Sato is a driver that I think is someone who I think is really, really good at these oval race tracks. Is really a specialty. He seems to be a lot better at the oval tracks and at the road courses, though. He does have some wins at road courses. Takuma Sato, let's talk about his chance of winning the Indy 500. Of course, he does have to qualify his way into the Indianapolis 500. But I think he has a very strong chance to win the Indy 500 this year. And you think about historical context. He won the 2017 Indy 500. He won the 2020 Indy 500. I would put your bets down that he could win the 2023 Indy 500 and become a 3-time Indy 500 champion, which would be absolutely incredible. There's not a lot of drivers that have been able to accomplish that. Of course, only 4 drivers have won 4 Indianapolis 500s. To be part of the 3-win club would be absolutely incredible if he was able to do that. But I think Takuma Sato can win the Indy 500. This is a championship caliber car, and I think he's going to have a very fantastic shot and a great opportunity to win. So I think he could win. We'll see what happens, but I think he can absolutely, for sure, win with the team, and I'm excited to see that he will be joining Chip Ganassi Racing this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Miguel Paludo. As it was announced yesterday that Miguel Paludo will be back in the Xfinity Series with Junior Motorsports in 2023, driving a number 88 car for 3 races. These 3 races will be at Circuit Americas, the Chicago Street Course, and the Indy Road Course. For the last couple years, Miguel Paludo has driven the number 88 Junior Motorsports car because of his brand sponsorship and funding. Brand is a big partner with Miguel Paludo, and we also saw that Justin Allgaier got a 70th anniversary scheme, which I think looks really awesome, by the way. But Miguel Paludo being back, I think he could potentially win. But again, I haven't been too impressed with Miguel since coming back. But again, I think that the more experience you give him, the better he's going to become. I don't ever see him going full-time, but I think it's really great that you're going to see this 88 car back on the track with Miguel, and it's really great to see that we're not just going to see the 80 for 2 races, we'll see at least for 5. I would not also be shocked or surprised if Hendrick finds a way once again to work with the 88 team to get their Cup guys in, considering Rick is the owner of the team. Wouldn't surprise and shock me if you see his Cup guys driving that 88 car at some point. But regardless, though, it's great to see that Miguel Paludo is going to be back and will be driving the 88 car for a couple of races. I hope he can do really, really good. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2023 Penny schedule, as the 2023 Penny schedule was revealed yesterday. Here's the schedule as follows. So the season is going to kick off on May 13th at Sunset Speedway. Then on May 21st, they're going to race at Canadian Tire. Then on June 10th, they'll race at the Autodrome Shoddy Air. Then after that, on June 24th, they'll race at Eastbound. Then on July 14th, they'll race at Toronto. Then on July 22nd, they'll race at Edmonton. Then after that, on July 26th, they'll have a doubleheader at Sutherland. After that, on August 6th, they'll race at Troy Revere. On August 14th, they'll race at Ohsweken. And then the next day, also at Ohsweken on August 15th. Then on August 26th, they'll race at ICAR. Then on September 3rd, they'll once again race at Canadian Tire. And then the final race of the season is going to take place at Delaware Speedway. This is a really exciting schedule for Pennies. I know there have been some rumors and rumors that they were maybe going to add more races, but regardless, a great variety of tracks, street courses, short tracks, road courses, you name it. I love it, the variety of Pennies' schedule has, and the racing also in Pennies is absolutely fantastic, and it's very, very enjoyable as well. So, regardless, I think it's really great to see. I actually really like the Pennies schedule, in my opinion. I think it looks really, really exciting. It looks fantastic, and I'm excited about the Pennies schedule heading into the 2023 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Travis Pastrana. Now, we talked about this on the channel yesterday in a special announcement that Travis Pastrana is going to be driving the third 2311 racing car, the number 67 car, with Black Rifle Coffee as the sponsorship. And there was more that came out talking about this. What he said was he came to a bunch of different teams, and he came to 2311 Racing saying that he basically wanted an opportunity to race once again in NASCAR. And obviously, Denny Hamlin really took a chance on picking up Travis Pastrana for those races. Now, one thing you know is Denny Hamlin also spoke to the media today during the production days, and Denny Hamlin basically said they really wanted a third car, and maybe they could run Travis Pastrana more. But the main reason they wanted a third car is if Kurt Busch is medically cleared to race, they could have Kurt Busch come in. Kurt Busch, to this point, Ed, from what I understand, has not been medically cleared to race at this time, though things can absolutely change. That's how the racing world works. Sometimes things can change, and drivers could get healthy, and they can come back. I think there's a really good chance that we will see Kurt Busch back at some point. I know Curtis said he wants to race Watkins Glen. I know he's wanted to say he wants to race Darlington, so maybe we'll see him cleared to race, and maybe other drivers, like in the Toyota pipeline, will get an opportunity to race from the lower series. It is good, though, that they're talking about running a third car, 2311, a lot more. And maybe in the future, especially with Denny Hamlin's contract talks, if Denny has to move away from the team, he could move there. Regardless, though, it is exciting to see that they're talking about having a third car going into the season. And we'll see what happens, but it sounds like they're trying to maybe get a third car a lot more frequently. And we'll see what happens going into the season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Hattori Racing. As it was announced and reported by TobyChristie.com that Hattori Racing is planning to scale back their 61 truck from a full-time truck to a part-time truck in 2023. Of course, in 2022, that they had two full-time entries, Chase Purdy in the 61 truck and Tyler Ankrum in the 16. Tyler Ankrum, of course, will be returning full-time in the number 16 truck, but the 61 truck will not be full-time this season. I think a lot of it does have to come down to sponsorship and funding. The big question, who will be driving that truck? There's a couple possibilities. I could see Colby Howard getting an opportunity to drive part-time with the team. Colby is still not announced currently at this moment for any ride at this point, and we're getting really close to the start of the season. So it is possible he drives for the team. Maybe we'll see Derek Kraus get an opportunity. We're going to talk about him very shortly, but maybe Derek Kraus gets an opportunity, or maybe someone from the lower series and the lower series will get an opportunity to drive. Who knows at this particular point, but again, I'm not shocked or surprised that Hattori Racing is downsizing going into this season, considering the second truck, considering that truck wasn't that successful to begin with, and I really never understood why Hattori had two full-time trucks. That being said, though, we'll see what happens this year, and hopefully Hattori Racing can do a really good job with both of their trucks, and they can make the playoffs, and maybe this will help Tyler Ankrum get an opportunity to be a lot more competitive this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson was speaking to people up at the Flow Racing booth after the race took place at the Wild West Shootout, and he says he plans to be back at the Wild West Shootout and will not be probably at the Chili Bowl once again in 2024. And Kyle Larson quintessentially, during that video that surfaced a couple days ago, he quintessentially called out basically the Chili Bowl, saying how long it took the race to get done, and they say that it was a lot more efficient. While a lot of people at the Chili Bowl were very disagreeable with Kyle Larson on a lot of his fronts and why he didn't show up, Kyle Larson's not completely wrong in the prize pool and all that kind of stuff. He's not wrong on that front. It took till almost 12:30 Central Standard Time for them to get the Chili Bowl completely done, like 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. That is extremely late to get a race done. I understand compared to the Wild West Shootout that they have a lot more racing to do, so of course they're going to get events done early, right? But they should be ending the races before midnight Central Standard Time, or even 12 a.m. on the East Coast. It's just ridiculous. It takes so long to get the races done, and I hope in the future they can find a way to get the races done a lot quicker and a lot faster. So, Kyle Larson calling out Chili Bowl, he's not entirely wrong in my opinion, and that's why I think you're seeing less drivers in the future going to be showing up, and they're probably going to go run other races. Plus, Kyle Larson won the Chili Bowl multiple times. He can do whatever he wants, and I think he deserves to call out something if they can't get their efficiency done, and hopefully in the future we can see them get the events done efficiently better in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Derek Kraus. As it was reported a couple days ago from Austin Kanensky that Derek Kraus has been apparently speaking to an Xfinity Series team for 2023. In that article, Kanensky mentions that the three teams are SS Greenlight Racing, Jesse Wuji Motorsports, and Kaulig Racing. SS Greenlight Racing will have two cars in 2023. They will be likely going back to Chevys. This could be a possibility for Derek Kraus. Second one, Jesse Wuji Motorsports. We know that Jesse Wuji wants to expand to a two-car operation. We do know that there's lawsuits going on with Prime Equity, with the company that's sponsored with Jesse Wuji, so we don't know what's going on there. And, of course, Kaulig Racing. We're going to talk about Kaulig, and I would think that there's a chance that this could be a possibility for Derek Kraus. But, look, Derek Kraus, I think, is a very talented driver. I think he really hasn't performed as good as he should have, but, again, I think he's done okay. He's not done bad. He's just every single year he's barely missed the playoffs. It's not like Derek Kraus is a bad driver. He's a pretty talented driver. I mean, he won an ARCA West Championship in 2019. So it's not like Derek Kraus doesn't know what he's doing. He is a talented driver and does know what he's doing. So we'll see what happens going into the season with Derek Kraus and wherever he ends up driving. But it's going to be interesting. I think Kaulig is still a very good possibility where he could end up, and we'll have to see what happens. But he's looking to drive for somebody this upcoming season, and hopefully whoever he ends up driving for, he can do a very good job. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Motorsports Games. Motorsports Games has been in the media, really, and a lot of talking points from a lot of people over the last few months due to a lot of controversies. And Motorsports Games, let's just say, is in a ton of trouble. You've got lawsuits going on within the company from people who are not being paid inside the company. You've got the board of directors a few months ago that basically threatened to, has basically already left the company. He's really right now the only person on the board of directors. They did get an investor that really only goes through 2023. You have talks and conversations that NASCAR 23 isn't even going to happen, and it's going to get delayed to 2024. And you also have the Le Mans virtual disaster. This company's absolutely in shambles. And what is going on right now is completely not only unacceptable, but unforgivable. Everything that's happened in this company, and now you've got talks of the source code being threatened to be leaked by, I believe, Russian employees because, quintessentially, they're not getting paid. They're being threatened to be moved to Georgia without being paid, which is absolutely absurd. You've got Dimitri Costa basically spending all those funds on nice cars, quintessentially, and everything going on is just, it's just really, really bad, everything going on. They're not getting deliverables. People are not getting paid at the company. You've got threats being made. Everything going on in Motorsports Games right now is absolutely just unacceptable, and I feel bad for people that work there. And again, there are employees who work at that company who are just trying to make good games. Unfortunately, when you're working at a company like Motorsports Games, you can't expect that because, again, the company sucks. I'm just going to say it. The company is a complete crap show, and it's just ridiculous, everything going on. And I feel terrible for these employees, and they shouldn't have to get to this point. They've got nothing to lose. Release the source code at this point. The 4 games that are being threatened to have the source code leak are NASCAR Heat 5, NASCAR 21 Edition, CarCraft, and the IndyCar game. They don't want that to happen, but pay your employees, and they're not going to do that. Just everything going on is just really, really unfortunate, and it does suck that it's gotten to this point. But sometimes you got to take drastic measures to make things happen, and it looks like that they're going to have to take some drastic measures for them to get paid. It's unfortunate. It sucks, but it is what it is. And honestly, go ahead and release it because they deserve it, and these guys have nothing to lose. So go ahead and release the source code and go ahead and do that because, in my opinion, they deserve everything that gets handed to, and I hope they fold and shut down. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Julio Castroneves. Now, Bob Pockrass was asked a question by a fan about Julio Castroneves and if he is still going to run the 2023 Daytona 500. Now, Julio Castroneves still could run the 2023 Daytona 500, but it will likely be with the Money Team if he is to enter the 2023 Daytona 500. The Money Team a couple months ago basically talked to the media, and well, basically I think it was back in early November, if I'm not mistaken, and they said that they are still in conversations to have Connor Daly run a bunch of races this season, and they're also still trying to get Julio Castroneves a possibility to run the 2023 Daytona 500. Julio Castroneves has said that he wants to race in NASCAR, and I really think that there's a good chance he could race the Daytona 500. We'll talk about Project 91 in a second, why that he's not going to be running that car, but the Money Team, they're not the fastest organization in the world, right? So you can't expect that they are going to be an extremely competitive team. That being said, though, I think it'll be good regardless if Julio is to run or not. I think his chance of making Daytona, or I don't know if they're slim to none, but if he can make it, because again, I think the Bunny Team, they'll have good pace and speed, and they're looking to be a better team this year and a more efficient team. They're going to run more races than they did in 2022. I think they only ran 4 races. They had some of those with Kaz Grala, and then the last one, Connor Daly. Regardless of how many races they do enter, though, it is exciting to see that they're still having conversations about Julio running the event. I really hope they find a way to get Julio Castroneves to run the race. We'll see what happens, and they're going to try to see if they can get him to run the race in 2023, and hopefully they're able to find a way to get him into the 2023 Daytona 500 with the Money Team. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daytona 500 open cars. Now, Bob Pockrass put out a tweet, I believe yesterday, talking about potential Daytona 500 open cars. And these are the open cars currently at the moment that have been confirmed and the potential possibilities. So, Jimmy Johnson, Travis Pastrana, Zane Smith, and Austin Hill are all confirmed. Jimmy driving an 84 for Legacy Motor Club. Travis Pastrana driving 67 for 2311 Racing. Zane Smith, who will drive either a Rick Ware car or a front row car. And Austin Hill, who will drive the 62 car for Beard Motorsports. The other possibilities stand as Kaulig Racing, which there's been rumors that Kaulig could run a third Kaulig car with the number 13. The Money Team, we just talked about them a second ago with Julio Castroneves. Team Haysbers, they could enter as many as 2 cars this year's Daytona 500, and NY Racing, which we thought they got sold off to 3F Racing. Turns out NY Racing is still a possibility, and 3F Racing, they're off the table because they're going to probably enter at Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. It's a goal for them to enter, though they have not announced a driver currently at the moment on that front. It's going to be interesting how many cars do enter, if all these cars enter, and obviously, he didn't mention the money, NBM Motorsports. NBM is also still a possibility that they can enter the Daytona 500 as well for this year. We're going to have to wait and see what happens on all the teams that do decide to enter the 2023 Daytona 500, but let's just say that the Daytona 500 in 2023 is setting itself up to be one of the most exciting Daytona 500 qualifying races we've seen. Wednesday and Thursday are going to be very, very important. And not only that, but also I think very, very exciting as well. Regardless of what happens, though, it'll be really good to see, and hopefully we'll see a lot more cars enter. And I hope that we see a ton of entries because it'll be not only great for the sport, and we see a lot more entries in this year's Daytona 500, and we can see a ton of entries enter the Daytona 500, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith. As it was just announced a second ago that Chandler Smith is going to be attempting to make this year's upcoming 2023 Daytona 500 driving a third Kaulig car, which is the number 13. In addition to that, he will run at Richmond, North Wilkesboro, Talladega, and Phoenix as well. First of all, I did not see this coming in any shape or form because Chandler Smith has only had 3 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in his career. So I'm definitely shocked and surprised he's going to be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut. Obviously, we'll talk about one of the reasons I think why he's not going to be basically running, why other drivers are not running that car. But this is definitely really, really shocking. But this tells me that Kaulig Racing is going to probably have multiple drivers in this car throughout the season, and this could end up being maybe a full-time entry throughout the year. The chances for Chandler Smith to make the Daytona 500 in his first ever start, I think, are really, really high. Kaulig Racing has a really solid super speedway program. Their super speedway program has been really, really strong. And he's going to have help from Allmendinger and Hemmer to make Allmendinger and the other driver, Justin Haley, to make the field. Both are really strong super speedway drivers, and they're probably going to be helping out Chandler Smith make the field. There are a lot of big, surprising, huge names, and it's just incredible to see you're going to have a driver like Chandler Smith at a young age, which the open cars continue to grow, and there's now 41 confirmed entries for the 500, which is great to see that people are going to be going home, and apparently more entries could be coming in the future. Like I've already mentioned, Team Haysbers could potentially be entering the 500, maybe 1 or 2 cars. MBM is still a possibility. TMT is still a possibility. And then you've got other teams that can still also show up at this year's Daytona 500, which is absolutely amazing to see. So regardless of what ends up happening, I'm excited for the future. And Chandler Smith's going to run some Cup racing this year, which I did not see that coming this year. And to think about this, Chandler Smith is only going to be 20 years old and making Cup starts because he doesn't turn 21 until later this year. But people 2 years younger than me are racing a Cup now. I mean, it's just crazy to think about, but it's wild and good to see that Chandler Smith's going to have an opportunity to be attempting this year's Daytona 500. I realistically think he's going to have a chance of making it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up making the show because I think he's got a really good shot to do it, and I think he's got a really good chance to get into this year's Daytona 500, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Project 91. As Justin Marks confirmed on Twitter yesterday that Project 91 is not going to be entering the 2023 Daytona 500. They're still working on finalizing their plans for that car, but the goal is likely for them to run the road courses. No drivers have been announced at this time for Project 91. But for the Daytona 500, they'll just be focusing on the 1 and the number 99 car, those, of course, driven by Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. I am not surprised or shocked in any slightest that Project 91 is not entering the Daytona 500. A lot of people thought that there was going to be a possibility this is where Julio Castroneves was going to end up driving, and a lot of people thought that because Julio Castroneves was talking to Justin Marks about running it, plus Justin Marks did substitute for him in the SRX race, but really that didn't mean anything at the time, at the current moment. But it is disappointing they're not going to enter the 500. That at least takes one of the entries away. But again, I think that they're just currently focused on getting all the road course races in and running all the road course races at the moment, which I think does make a lot of sense at the end of the time. I think it does make a lot of sense that they're going ahead and doing that. So there's still possibly some drivers entering that car, of course. I would not be surprised if you seen Shane Van Gisbergen, Maybe long-term Castroneves gets an opportunity to drive that car. That could be a possibility. There's other drivers that could drive the car. Who knows at this particular point? But again, it's a little disappointing that Project 1's not entering the Daytona 500. But again, I'm not shocked or surprised. There's still a huge field for this year's Daytona 500. And regardless, though, I am getting excited for this year's 500. It's disappointing we're not going to see Project 1, but they're focused on the road courses. Maybe they bring Kimi Räikkönen out the track. Who knows at this particular point what's going to happen there. But again, I'm not completely surprised or shocked Project 1 is not entering the 500 this year. But it is a little disappointing that they're not going to enter the Daytona 500 in 2023. Maybe in 2024, we see them enter this car. It is very possible. We'll have to wait and see. And we'll see if Project 1 does enter this car in 2024 in Daytona 500. I really hope they do because it could be really, really great for the sport. And hopefully we'll see them enter this car in the 2024 Daytona 500 because that'd be fun. And Trackhouse then could have 3 cars. And maybe in the future they make the 91 car a full-time entry with a rotation of different drivers, not just from outside the country, but inside the United States as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Landon Cassill. As it was unfortunately announced this morning that Landon Cassill will not be returning to Kaulig Racing full-time in 2023. Landon Cassill confirmed on Twitter this morning there have been some rumors that Landon Cassill was potentially going to be out of Kaulig Racing for this season, but unfortunately Landon had to confirm the news himself that this unfortunately would be happening. The big reason why Landon Cassill will not be returning full-time to Kaulig Racing in 2023 is due to sponsorship issues. Earlier last year, in the late portion of 2022, rumors and rumblings began the Voyager had unfortunately went bankrupt. So at the time, I was very surprised that Landon had signed for 2023 on a full-time basis, considering the fact that Voyager had unfortunately went bankrupt, and I thought that was unfortunately going to be the catalyst for him losing his ride. And I thought that maybe he was still going to be with the team, but unfortunately, and which he's still going to be with the team, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately, not on a full-time basis. Like I said, though, it's very disappointing for Landon Cassill because some people probably would think, oh, Landon Cassill's an overrated driver. I disagree. Landon Cassill, he's a pretty good driver, in my opinion. He can drive a car really well. I remember when he qualified, I think, in the top 15 in a Morgan Shepherd racing car and was running top 15 on pace and speed in a Morgan Shepherd car. And this was really his best opportunity and shot. And he's still going to get to run McCall racing this year throughout the season, don't get me wrong. But it's just disappointing because this is like his best opportunity he's had in like 15 years last year and was going to have another opportunity to prove himself. And yeah, he didn't perform fantastic with Kaulig Racing, but it really wasn't just Landon Cassill's fault. I put a lot of that on the equipment this year because he put so much strain on the equipment with him having 2 Cup cars and 3 Xfinity cars. It put a lot of strain on that team going into the season, so you can't really put all the blame on Landon Cassill on that front. Could he perform better? Yes, but I also think that Kaulig Racing themselves, they're going to have to figure something out going into the season on what they're going to do and who will drive the car now. And the question now is who will drive that car going into the season. You would have to think there's a couple possibilities at this particular point. I would have to think if there's a couple drivers. Kyle Busch maybe gets some Xfinity Series starts again. Allmendinger's probably going to drive that car throughout the season, which he drove that when he came back to Xfinity and racing in NASCAR in general. I would have to think Justin Haley's going to get some starts in that car. And I wouldn't be surprised if Derek Kraus also is getting some starts in that number 10 car throughout the season as well. We talked about that here earlier in this episode. But it's just very disappointing news to hear that Landon Cassill is not going to be racing full-time this season. But again, unfortunately, sponsorship funding plays a role in pretty much everything at this point, and it's very disappointing news for sure. So at least he'll get to run part-time with the team, but it's disappointing he will not be full-time with the team going the season. It's really sad and just unfortunate Landon Cassill is not going to be full-time. Hopefully in the future he gets to go back full-time with a competitive team, but this might have been his last opportunity to be full-time in a series. So disappointing news, but not unfortunately the most shocking news in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that 2311 Racing plans to break ground on a new HQ in coming weeks and move in by 2024. He also notes and says, while Denny Hamlin said last year that major investments were on hold until TV talks with NASCAR were resolved, the team is moving forward. What this sounds like to me is maybe negotiations could potentially be going a little bit better. The fact that they're moving forward with getting this HQ built, that might be helping the team. And what this also means is that I think one of the reasons why I think this is happening and they're getting their HQ going is there's a lot of talk conversation about 2311 expanding their organization going into the next couple of years. Obviously, that we're going to see a third car at the Daytona 500 this year in 2023, and they're talking about bringing Kurt Busch in and trying to get him for a few races in that third 67 car. And we also know Denny Hamlin has said publicly that he wants to run maybe up to 3 or 4 cars with this organization in the future. It's also possible Denny could join his own organization next year. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But you think about the future of 23XI Racing. This team is setting themselves up to potentially be not only a team that's much better, but they're setting themselves up, in my opinion, to be the team that is going to lead Toyota long term, because with Joe Gibbs Racing's turmoil and some of their issues going on right now, they might lose some performance going into this season, and they may not run as well as they have in previous seasons, which could really affect the Toyota program in general. And we may see 23XI Racing long-term become the Toyota team that is to be and where all the Toyota drivers want to go. And you obviously have a place potentially in the future, if you expand your team, to move your guys up. Guys like Sammy Smith, John Hunter Nemechek, if he doesn't go to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Drivers that could be picked up from the Toyota pipeline that could be free agents at the end of the season, like a Corey LaJoie perhaps, could be a potential option, though Denny and Corey have had issues in the past. Maybe they've resolved them, though. Who knows at this point. But 23XI Racing planning to work on that building is to get them, because Denny's had a vision. He wants to be a 3 or 4 car team, and they want to eventually become a team that can win championships, and maybe this year win a championship with Tyler Reddick. Who knows at this point. But regardless of getting into that shop and getting that thing built up, I think we're seeing 23XI Racing really set himself for the future. They've got sponsorship funding coming in left, right, and center, and this team is setting themselves up for a really bright future long term. The shop is the next big key step to getting that rolling, and we'll see what happens. But it looks like 23XI Racing will be building that shop and getting themselves prepared and setting themselves up for a very bright future going forward. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens with 23XI, but they're setting themselves up for a pretty good future going forward, and getting that shop built by 2024 is the goal. They actually were hoping to have the shop built by 2023, but they put that on hold with the TV deal. Sounds like the TV deal might be becoming and might be getting a little bit better than we initially thought, which is overall really good for the sport, and hopefully the TV deal can get done so things can get better. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. And we got a couple of drivers we're going to talk about when it comes to contract extensions. First one we're talking about is Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin spoke to Bob Pockrass at the production days yesterday, and production days are still going on today as we speak. But he spoke to Bob Pockrass at the production days, and he says that he is really confident that he will extend with Joe Gibbs Racing, especially with his alliance with the Toyota pipeline. He is really confident that he is going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, and they're going to get an extension done. Denny Hamlin is currently in a contract year with Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of this season, and there's been a lot of talks and rumors about the future of FedEx maybe leaving the organization completely or dropping and scaling back their sponsorship, which could play a major role in Denny Hamlin's long-term future at the organization. Now, the good news for Denny Hamlin fans is that Denny Hamlin is to leave Joe Gibbs Racing. At least he will not be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing completely or leaving the Toyota pipeline in general. He'll still be going over to 23XI Racing, but driving for them instead of driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. So he's not leaving Toyota completely. He's got a team to go to. So Denny Hamlin is not in any jeopardy regardless. He'll be either Joe Gibbs Racing or 23XI. The big key is going to be FedEx. If FedEx leaves Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the season, there's a very strong possibility and a very strong chance that they're going to take Denny Hamlin with them, and that Denny will leave the organization. Because that's what Denny has said, is that yes, he's confident they're going to get a deal done, but remember the whole Kyle Busch situation where they were confident they're going to get a deal done with Kyle, and then that unfortunately fell through, and Kyle ended up going to Richard Childress Racing. The good news is Toyota won't lose him. But Joe Gibbs Racing, they're wanting to probably keep Denny Hamlin because they don't have a lot of older talent. And unfortunately, the reality is that there is a lot of talk and conversation currently at the moment that Martin Truex Jr. also going to retire at the end of the year. If you lose both Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin, that's going to put Joe Gibbs Racing in a lot of major trouble. So my hope at this point, if you're Joe Gibbs Racing, you've got to at least keep one of your veterans. I think there's a good chance Denny does return to the team, and I'm confident they're going to get him back. But then again, I was confident that Kyle was going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing at the beginning of 2022. And then all the stuff happened where the M&M stuff kind of fell through because we all thought he had a contract through 2023. But again, in 2021, they announced Ascension. It was February 1st, so it could be announced any time. Who knows at this point? But they're working on getting the contract done. Hopefully they can get a contract done so Denny Hamlin can return to the team. I think there's a chance he returns to the team. I would give it probably about a 75 to 80% chance currently at the moment he returns to Joe Gibbs Racing. But if he doesn't, that's going to be something really interesting to watch. And hopefully they can get a deal done so that then he can return to the team and stay with the organization. So we'll see what happens, but they're going to try to get the deal done, and hopefully they can get the deal done so Denny can stay long-term with Joe Gibbs Racing, and we'll see what he does going into 2023 performance-wise, because Denny is getting a little bit older too, and he's probably getting close to retirement, though he's said he wants to race like 2026 or 2027. I'm not sure if he's going to last that long due to injuries and stuff. So we'll see what happens, but Denny Hamlin's confident he can return to Joe Gibbs. We'll see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, Alex Bowman is also like Denny Hamlin in a contract year with Hendrick Motorsports. He was speaking to Bob Pockets yesterday about that. He says Hendrick Motorsports has already begun starting talks about a contract extension with Alex Bowman, and he is currently very encouraged about how things are going, and he thinks the deal could get done in the coming months. Like I just mentioned a second ago, Alex Bowman is in a contract year, and another part of that is that the company Ally, which sponsors Alex Bowman for pretty much the whole entire season, that they're also in a contract year with Hendrick Motorsports as well. Now, Alex Bowman has a pretty big year coming up, and this is going to be a very important year for Alex Bowman to perform, because if Ally leaves, who knows at this point. But again, I think there's a good chance because Ally's got a pretty big, because it used to be GMAC, and GMAC used to sponsor Hendrick. I'll say this about Alex Bowman's chances of returning to Hendrick Motorsports and confidence, because like I said, Alex Bowman is very confident and he's encouraged. I think he will return to Hendrick Motorsports. I'm more confident that he's going to return back. I think it's about a 90-95% chance and 95% likelihood that he does return to Hendrick Motorsports in 2024. In fact, I think he's going to get a multi-year extension, but it all depends on Ally. And I think Ally more than likely, considering they've worked Alex Bowman a lot, I'm pretty confident to say that I think Alex Bowman is going to return with Hendrick Motorsports, and I think that he will. But what if Alex Bowman doesn't return to Hendrick Motorsports in 2024? It's very possible they could go to Stewart Haas Racing and go to the 4-car. We still don't know who's driving that, but who knows there. But going back and talk about this, the chance of Alex Bowman returning to Hendrick Motorsports, I think are pretty high. It all depends on Ally. Ally's going to be the big key, in my opinion, if he's going to return to Hendrick Motorsports or not. That's going to be the major key and the major factor. If Ally signs a multi-year extension, if they sign a 2 or 3 year deal with him, that will probably be the thing that will keep him there. I'm confident that they will keep Bowman because Bowman's got a big year coming up. He's got a new crew chief this year, Blake Harris, and I think Ally's going to look at the performance this year. They're going to watch performance. If he performs great this year and even makes the playoffs this year, they're easily going to sign the contract. And honestly, if he wins a race early in the year, that's when they sign a deal. If he can get a win early in the year, they sign a deal early, and that's when they will get him back. But I think at this point, more than likely, he's going to return to the organization, and I think he will be returning and drive for Hendrick Motorsports in 2024. The question is, how long do I think the deal will be? I think it'll be about a 2 or 3 year deal with Alex Bowman. I think that this is going to be about a 2 or 3 year deal, and probably around 2025, 2026, which by that point, I believe Bowman is going to be 32, 33, and it'll have been at Hendrick Motorsports for a long time. Because Hendrick's got, of course, William Byron through 2025, Kyle Larson through 2026, and Chase Elliott through 2027, though let's be for real. The other 3 drivers are probably lifelong drivers who are probably going to stay at Hendrick Motorsports pretty much through their whole entire careers and stay with the team. Bowman's the only one that's anywhere close to being in jeopardy of leaving, though I still am confident, like I said here, I'm pretty confident Bowman is going to get an extension with Hendrick Motorsports long term. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that when it comes to Alex Bowman. But I am very confident he will get an extension with the team going into the season, and I'm pretty confident he returns to Hendrick Motorsports long term. I think he stays with the team, and I think he will be 100% returning to the team heading into the 2023 season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX, as multiple drivers have been announced to the SRX for 2023. First, yesterday morning, it was announced that Kevin Harvick is going to be driving in 2 SRX races in 2023. Those races are at Stafford, which I think is the first race of the season, and then at Berlin Racing on August 3rd. Kevin Harvick's been rumored and rumbled, and the SRX has been trying to get Kevin Harvick to run the SRX for a while, so he'll be joining the SRX this season. It also was announced this morning 3 more drivers were confirmed to drive for the SRX. First one was Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is going to run 2 SRX races in 2023. He is going to run at the Motor Mile, and he's also going to run at Berlin Raceway on August the 3rd. The next one that was announced was Julio Castroneves. Julio Castroneves is going to run 3 SRX races in 2023. Those 3 races are the Motor Mile, Berlin Raceway, and Lucas Oil, which I thought that was IRP. Turns out that is Lucas Oil in Missouri. The other driver that was announced, which isn't a complete surprise to me, is Clint Bowyer. Clint Bowyer is going to run at Stafford, the Motor Mile, and Lucas Oil Raceway. Let's talk about all 4 of these drivers entering the SRX. The SRX is getting a lot more superstar drivers for the season. And let's start with Kevin Harvick. I didn't really put Kevin Harvick in the wish list video that I wanted in the SRX, but Kevin Harvick's a driver that has got a great personality, and that's what the SRX is looking for, are those personalities that can really bring the sport in and grow the sport in general. He brings that personality, and he's a driver that probably will have Busch sponsorship as well. Maybe they bring the Classic 29 back, and that which is the number he initially ran in the Cup Series throughout the majority of his career. That could be a possibility of the number that he ends up running. Next, let's talk about Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch absolutely got a fantastic personality. He's probably going to have Rowdy Energy sponsorship on his car probably here. And I think Kyle Busch is going to be a threat to win both races. And going back to Kevin Harvick as well, I think he's going to be 100% a threat to win both races in the SRX season. Next, let's talk about Castroneves. Castroneves is the only driver who has ran in the XRS of the drivers running in this event. He, of course, won an SRX race last year. I think it was at Stafford, if I'm not. No, it was 5 Flag Speedway that he won, and that's why he's getting an opportunity to potentially run the Daytona 500 this year. Castroneves, fantastic personality, a joy to be around for a lot of drivers. He's coming in with a lot of talent as well. And finally, Clint Bowyer, running 3 SRX races. Clint Bowyer's got a fantastic personality, and I think he'll be a threat to win that race at Lucas Oil at Wheatland, Missouri. I think he's going to be absolutely a threat to win there. It's kind of a local track, considering he kind of lives kind of close to that area. I think he's going to be a threat. I love the drivers they've already announced. I think these are the first 4 drivers that have been confirmed for the SRX season at this point, outside of Tony Stewart, which, again, the SRX is really hitting up, and they're getting a lot of big names entering the SRX this season. And my big question is, what other drivers could they bring in? Could they bring Kyle Larson in? Could they bring Chase Elliott in? I would have to think Haley Deegan. She's probably being considered for the SRX this season, though she's got some other endeavors that she's working on for 2023, of course, running full-time with ThorSport Racing. Maybe they bring Bubba Wallace in. Maybe they bring some drivers from IndyCar, like a Joseph Newgarden once again back to the series. Scott Dixon. I think anything is possible at this point. Maybe they bring Tyler Reddick in to drive. Carl Edwards, what about him? He could be a possibility to drive. Who knows at this particular point, but the SRX, I think this year could genuinely have a breakout year in a big way. I think one of the reasons why you're also getting all these drivers coming in is on a Thursday night. With it being on Thursday night compared to Saturday, drivers are a lot more open on their schedule. And I think you're going to see a lot more NASCAR Cup Series drivers and a lot more drivers from other respective series that you would not have seen in the SRX before coming in and racing in the SRX, which I think is really, really exciting that you're going to see a lot more drivers. I would love for them to expand the field going in the year, maybe up to 15 or 16 cars so we can get more and more entries. But man, the SRX this year is shaping up to be a really, really fantastic year. And I am excited for the SRX going into the season. The fact that there's more drivers entering, the better, in my opinion. And it's exciting to see that you're going to see drivers like Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, who I think can win their races that they're in respectfully. And I also think Clint Bowyer probably win, and Castroneves can win. I think it's going to be fun. The personalities matter. Thursday night racing is going to be fun. I think if you're going those races, you're going to have a lot of superstars to tune into and look out for. And I think it's exciting to see that the SRX is going to be expanding their schedule. Well, not expanding, but having more drivers in. Really exciting for sure. And I think Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch can absolutely win. They're bringing great personalities. And I think it's really exciting to see that the SRX is doing great things. Hopefully we'll see more fantastic drivers run in the SRX this season. And I think it's really great for the sport overall, in my opinion. So, that is going to be for today's long NASCAR and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on, to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are below over that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about all the news we talked about today, including the SRX news with Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick entering? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Alex Bowman's future? Do you think he returns at Hendrick in 2024 or not? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm not entirely sure what's going to be on the channel. It could be a NASCAR news video. It could be anything at this point. Could be an updated Daytona 500 interest. Who knows at this point? We're getting really close to the start of the season, and news is going to be breaking left, right, and center as we get close to the start of this season. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.